In 1950, the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company posted its highest profit in history. Net earnings reached $94.5 million, the largest profit ever recorded by a wholly British corporation. Of that, the Iranian government received $45 million in royalties. Approximately 19% of the profits generated from Iranian oil, extracted from Iranian territory. The British government, taxing the same company on the same profits, collected more than Iran did in taxes on Iranian oil. This disparity had existed in various forms since 1901. And when the Iranian government asked to audit the books, to verify the royalty calculations, the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company refused. That refusal was the beginning of the end. Within a year, the Iranian parliament had voted to nationalize its own oil industry. Within 2 years, the United States Central Intelligence Agency had approved $1 million to remove Iran's elected prime minister. Within 3 years, the prime minister was in prison. A Western oil consortium had replaced the company whose books he had tried to examine. This is the documented story of the 1953 Iran coup, the financial terms that caused it, and the financial terms that replaced them. In 1901, William Knox D'Arcy obtained a concession from the Persian Shah. It granted exclusive rights to explore and extract oil across most of the country for 60 years. The price, £20,000 in cash, £20,000 in shares, and 16% of annual net profits. Oil was discovered in commercial quantities in 1908. The Anglo-Persian Oil Company was formed to exploit it. In 1914, Winston Churchill, then First Lord of the Admiralty, converted the Royal Navy from coal to oil power. To guarantee the fuel supply, the British government purchased a 51% controlling stake in Anglo-Persian for £2.2 million. The Iranian oil fields were no longer just a commercial investment. They were a strategic asset of the British state. The financial terms evolved but remained structurally unfavorable to Iran. In 1932, Iran cancelled the D'Arcy Concession entirely. The League of Nations became involved. In 1933, under British pressure, a new concession was negotiated. The new terms were somewhat better for Iran, but the structure remained the same. A British corporation, with the British government as majority shareholder, held exclusive rights to Iranian oil. In 1950, with the company renamed Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, the disparity in the books was stark. AIOC reported net profits of $94.5 million. Iran's royalties, $45 million. What the British government collected in corporate taxes on those profits exceeded what Iran received in royalties on oil extracted from Iranian territory. In the same period, the American company Aramco had signed a 50-50 profit-sharing agreement with Saudi Arabia. Iran was aware of this comparison. Mossadegh's allies raised it repeatedly in parliament. If you already knew this part of the story, drop a £sign in the comments. I want to know how many of you have been down this rabbit hole before. Mohammad Mosaddegh was 69 years old when he became Prime Minister of Iran on April 30, 1951. He was not a communist. He was a nationalist and a lawyer who had studied at the University of Paris. He had spent his career arguing that Iran's resources belonged to Iran. He had proposed the audit request that AIOC rejected. After the rejection, the Iranian Majlis, the parliament, voted on March 15, 1951, to nationalize the oil industry. The nationalization bill passed unanimously. Mosaddegh became prime minister to implement it. The Abadan refinery, by 1950, the world's largest oil refinery, was nationalized. British technical personnel were withdrawn. Iran tried to sell its oil on international markets. Britain organized a boycott. No Western tanker would load Iranian crude. The British response escalated through diplomatic and economic channels. London referred the case to the International Court of Justice, froze Iranian assets held in British banks, lobbied the United States to join the economic pressure. The Truman administration was reluctant at first. Truman's Secretary of State, Dean Acheson, believed Mosaddegh could be negotiated with. But in 1953, Dwight Eisenhower became president. His CIA director was Allen Dulles. His Secretary of State was John Foster Dulles. Allen's brother, the Dulles brothers, saw Mosaddegh differently, not as a nationalist seeking equitable oil terms, as a political opening for Soviet influence in a country that shared a border with the USSR. On April 4, 1953, CIA Director Allen Dulles approved $1 million for a covert operation, designated TPAJAX. Operation Ajax to the Americans, Operation Boot to the British. The operational director on the ground was Kermit Roosevelt Jr., grandson of President Theodore Roosevelt, and a senior CIA officer stationed in Tehran. The operation's mechanics were specific. Roosevelt distributed funds to agents who hired demonstrators. Mobs were organized from Tehran's athletic clubs and the poor districts of South Tehran. Newspapers were bribed to run anti-Mosaddegh stories. Religious figures received payments. Military officers were approached. The goal was to create the appearance of popular opposition and to persuade, or bribe, sufficient military officers to move against Mosaddegh. Subscribe. There is a lot more where this came from. The first coup attempt failed. On August 15, 1953, the operation was activated. Mosaddegh had been warned. The soldiers who arrived to arrest him were arrested instead. The Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, fled to Rome. Roosevelt and his CIA colleagues in Tehran debated whether to abort. They did not. Roosevelt reorganized the operation over the following days. On August 19, 1953, the second attempt succeeded. Mobs moved through Tehran. Military units defected to the coup side. Mossadegh's offices were surrounded. Approximately 300 people died in the fighting. The following day, Mossadegh surrendered. He was arrested, tried by a military tribunal. Originally sentenced to death for treason, the Shah commuted the sentence. 3 years of solitary confinement in a military prison, followed by house arrest at his home in the village of Ahmedabad. He never held public office again. He died under house arrest in 1967, at age 84. He had never been allowed to speak publicly about the coup. His trial had been conducted by a military tribunal. No civilian court. The verdict was decided before the proceedings began. That is the documented record. He was buried at his home because the government feared that a public funeral would become a political demonstration. The man who asked to audit the oil company's books spent his last 14 years confined to his village. What happened next is the suppressed calculation that most accounts skip. By 1951, Iran was running the Abadan refinery itself. Iranian engineers and workers had operated the facility under British management for decades. When the British technical staff withdrew after nationalization, Iran continued producing oil, but no Western tanker would load it. The boycott was effective, not because Iran couldn't pump oil, but because the distribution system was controlled by Western companies. The tankers, the refineries, the distribution networks, all of it was structured to be unworkable without British participation. This was not an accident of geography. It was the architecture of dependency that the original concession had built. What happened next is the suppressed calculation that most accounts skip. In 1954, 18 months after the coup, a new oil consortium was assembled to replace the nationalized AIOC. Anglo-Iranian Oil Company received 40% of the new consortium. Royal Dutch Shell received 14%. A French company received 6%. The remaining 40% went to 5 American oil companies: Standard Oil of New Jersey, Standard Oil of California, Socony Vacuum, Gulf Oil, and the Texas Company. The United States had organized and funded the coup through the CIA. It now collected 40% of Iranian oil revenues through American companies in the post-coup arrangement. The financial terms of the new consortium, a 50-50 profit split with the Iranian government. The same arrangement Mosaddegh had been willing to accept before nationalization. Britain spent $1 million, organized a coup, and killed 300 people. It imprisoned an elected prime minister, and achieved oil terms in 1954 that were available without a coup in 1950. Except that American companies now held 40% of what had previously been entirely British. The operation that Britain asked America to help finance created an American stake in Iranian oil that had not previously existed. Let's step back and look at what the documented record shows. In 1950, the British government collected more in taxes from AIOC than Iran received in royalties from its own oil. The Iranian parliament voted unanimously to nationalize in March 1951. The CIA approved $1 million for Operation Ajax on April 4, 1953. Kermit Roosevelt Jr. directed the operation from Tehran, paying demonstrators and military officers. The first coup attempt failed on August 15, 1953. The second succeeded on August 19, with approximately 300 deaths. Mosaddegh was imprisoned for 3 years in solitary confinement, then held under house arrest until his death in 1967. In 1954, a consortium restored oil production with a 50-50 split, the same terms that could have been negotiated in 1950. American companies held 40% of the new arrangement. I want to be precise here. This is an analysis of documented institutional decisions and their documented financial consequences. The CIA's role in the 1953 coup was formally acknowledged by the agency in 2013. The D'Arcy Concession terms, the AIOC's 1950 profits, Iran's royalties, and the 1954 consortium arrangements are all matters of public record. The analysis requires no embellishment. The documented record is sufficient. The consequences extended far beyond 1953. The Shah's post-coup government was authoritarian and US-backed. Political opposition was suppressed. The internal pressure built for 26 years. In 1979, the Iranian Revolution removed the Shah. The American hostage crisis, 444 days, followed. The Islamic Republic that emerged has been in sustained confrontation with Western powers for 4 decades. The 1953 coup was designed to protect oil revenues and prevent Soviet influence. It produced a political outcome that neither Britain nor the United States anticipated. The oil concession that was the immediate object of the operation was worth, at most, a few $100 million annually. The strategic cost, measured in 4 decades of hostility, has been incalculable. The verdict on the 1953 Iran coup, the British government and the CIA removed an elected prime minister. To protect an oil concession that paid Iran 19% of its own oil profits, 18 months later, they negotiated a 50-50 split, what was available without the coup. The man who asked for an audit spent 14 years under house arrest. The political consequences took 26 years to fully arrive. They have not ended, if you have made it this far across this entire series. 10 videos, you already know more than most. Subscribe, there is more where this came from, and I will see you in the next one.